Hi, Tracy Sews, Tracy McElfresh, also known as Tracy's Sewing Studio or just Tracy McElfresh. So all of my socials are under there. And today I am talking about patches, also known as applique. So when you hear somebody say applique, it's really applique is an umbrella term. It could be anything that is applied to another fabric. So if I took my t-shirt and I wanted to put my whole t-shirt back here and sew it on, that is called applique. If I wanted to make a beautiful picture on top of this jacket with different fabrics, that is called applique. So there's many different kinds of applique. I also used to teach reverse applique, where you put a piece of fabric behind the garment and then you would draw a picture on it, sew around and cut the outside out, so the inside. So that's reverse applique. So those are just three types of applique that you can think about. But today we are talking about patches, and I have 7 tips for you. Number 1, don't overthink it. No matter how hard you try, they're not gonna look perfect. And you can always go back in and rip it out and redo it if it's crooked or you went off of it, because it's very precise. So the easiest patches are the square patches and rectangle patches. Those are the easiest to go around. And in my experience, I have found the hardest patches are any kind of points. So anytime you have little points, you get a lot of hard patches. So this wolf, the teeth, and all of those things were really challenging. So that leads in to my next thing, how to hold them on if they're big and heavy. You're gonna poke your fingers with a lot of pins in them, although you can pin them, but not all of them are pinnable because some of them have glue on the back. So a couple things you could do if they have glue on the back and you cannot get a pin into them, if your material is pressable, you can iron them on first and get them to stick on and then sew them around. You can't just iron them on, unfortunately, because if you go to wash or dry your garment or over time, that will peel up. They need to be sewn down. So if you cannot iron your fabric, or you're too scared to iron it onto the fabric because you're not sure if it's gonna melt, or you're not sure what kind of fabric it is, or patch, and it has that glue on the back or not, you can take double-sided Scotch sticky tape and stick them where you want them, one at a time, because as you're sewing around, they're going to come up. So I would stick on one at a time, and you can choose to remove that sticky tape and pull it out before you finish. When you get almost all the way around, you can stop and pull that sticky tape out, or you can leave it on. It's never gonna make a difference. Nobody's ever gonna know that that tape is in there. So those are 2 ways that you can hold it on. So next we have, to lead into these little points, what you can do is you can lower your stitch length. And if you lower your stitch length, it won't jump as big, and you will be able to stop on these points, lift your foot up and turn. Know that that's going to take forever. This is not the hardest one. I'd say this is the hardest, second hardest I've ever done. The hardest ones are the Grateful Dead ones that have the bears all over them. I did a Ferris wheel with hundreds of different dancing bears in different poses, hundreds. Maybe there was like 30 bears on the Ferris wheel. And going around all of that stuff was quite the challenge. So this isn't the hardest, but it's pretty close contender. So when I'm on the straightaways, I can have a 3-point stitch length, but when I have to come around these little tiny corners, it won't jump as big on the corner if I have a tiny stitch length. So I'm talking about 2 or 2.5 stitch length. It'll be easier to go around these little corners. Now, tip number 4 is don't be afraid to jump. Don't be afraid and jumping is usually in the embroidery term, where you sew a little embroidery flower and then you jump over to another area and sew without locking in your stitch or tying it. So some of the places I would have jumped would have been, you know, from a point to another point, just a small part to get down to these little tiny teeth. Sometimes if you have little tiny teeth that go straight across, but they're all in points, you can actually just go straight across and it's not visible. So that's tip number 4. Don't be afraid to do small jumps from place to place. You will see that on bridal embroidery, where they put the lace motif over seams, and they will put their sewing machine on free motion, and they'll jump and tack a few stitches and jump and tack a few stitches. So consider that another way to get your appliques on, just to make it a little easier. So matching up the threads, so that's another big thing, because sometimes this will be really easy to match up with black, but sometimes they have the tiniest little lines going around in a color. And let's say, just like this, it's yellow, and then there's the tiniest little black line going around there that I'm not gonna be able to stay on with black thread. I'm gonna make a big mess. So what you can do is use the more prominent color, the yellow, and just go on the inside of their black line to try to match it up. So I would try to match up the colors the best I can. On the front, there was one I did today that was really hard and had a fine, fine line. I believe this was it. This one was easy. This one was a challenge, and it's red and green. I did it in all red, not even noticeable. So sometimes it's easy. As long as you match up the thread really well, you can't see those small perfections. So try to match up the thread the best you can. Number 6, be aware of pockets. This is a big one. People will come in and they will say, I want you to do the patch here and here and here. And here's the thing. Do you want these pockets usable? Are you going to use these pockets? And they're always like, yes. And then you say, well, then I have to take the whole pocket off, put the patch on, and then put the pocket back on. And so that's going to cost more. That's going to cost probably double whatever it is, because it's going to be hard to take this pocket off, and that's going to take a lot of time just to get it off, and then to put it back on is a whole nother story. So do you want the pockets usable? I'm going to tell you, they're going to say yes almost all the time, but be frustrated when there's 4 pockets and it's $40 extra, which isn't a lot. You gotta, if you're making a living at this, you gotta charge what you can to make it work. And that's why so many seamstresses have quit doing projects like this and only do formal wear, because they can't make enough money, and the public doesn't know that and doesn't understand that, nor does anybody want to tell them that, you know, you don't make a lot of money in this business. This isn't McDonald's. We're not plowing out 1,000 burgers a day. We can only do so much. So the other part that you want to be aware of, besides the pockets, is getting down into these sleeves. To get down into these sleeves and sew around something, you will be sewing around it through this little hole. And can you guess what's going to happen there? Things are going to tuck up and get into the way. So this is another part where you may want to open this seam and have it out flat. So those are all tip number 9. Tip number 10, keep a log of your time if you're charging for this. So this is more the business side of it. If you do a big patch like this, figure out how long it took you so that the next time you charge accordingly, because it's very hard to look at something and say, this is how much it costs if you've never done it, and then you lose money. And that's part of being new. So if you're gonna do this job, go ahead and get used to that. But you do learn and you do get faster, and you will say like, okay, this took me 2 hours for just this patch, this is how much money I need to make it work if I'm going to do this project. So I love, love, love patches, because most of the people that have patches, whether they be motorcycle patches, army, whatever, like VA people, people that want to keep their memories, they're usually very sentimental people, and they're usually very lax and kind. So I love doing them. Another thing you may want to consider is charging extra to get it back to them right away, because there's so much sentimental value here. They usually don't want to leave their stuff with somebody for very long. So you can say, like, you know, I like to get these back to people right away, and you just charge a little bit more to make it so that you don't have their sentimental thing that they can't wait to wear and show off forever, and that usually makes other people happy. A lot of people with patches are not looking for the lowest bidder. They're not calling around looking for the lowest person, unless it's like a Boy Scout or a kid thing. In that case, I always recommend one of my sewing classes. You can come learn to sew with me. So that's it, all 10. I hope that you love them. This is way longer than a minute. I am so sorry, but it was a lot of information to cover. Tracy McElfresh, Tracy Sews. Have a great day. Bye.